As the 20th century drew to a close in America, people across the country began to question whether or not the public education system was working. With low test scores and widespread failure to meet educational standards in the 1980s, many politicians, parents, and school officials feared that our country was at risk for failing to provide children with an adequate education. This fear, which led to great concern for the well-being of the country and for the future of the rising generation, brought about many different approaches to fix the education system. These approaches ranged from small adjustments to radical changes, and each of them had their own effect on the education system.
One attempt to improve public education came in the form of competition. Some people believed that public schools held a monopoly on education, and as a result, they had little incentive to strive for improvement. By getting schools to compete with one another, both public and private, they were forced to raise their standards and increase achievement out of fear of losing their students, and therefore funding. One example of this took place in East Harlem, where 20 public school buildings were converted into 52 alternative schools, each one focusing on a different field of interest such as sports, theater, or science. With so many schools in such a small area, each one needed to maintain a steady attendance to produce successful students. This competitive environment forced the schools to keep their standards high in order to stay open. While this was a rather extreme form of competition among schools, it was successful in many ways, and student achievement improved significantly throughout the area.
High-stakes testing was another approach that was introduced into the public education system in an attempt to improve student achievement. In order to evaluate what students had learned and what needed to be improved upon, testing in areas such as math, reading, and science were used. Great amounts of money and resources were poured into this area of education, and over $500 million was spent on standardized testing from 1983 to 1984 alone. While assessment is a necessary part of any educational process, standardized testing has been driven to a new extreme over the course of the past few decades. Teachers and schools are held accountable for their students' performances through threats of lower salaries, less funding, and even possibly losing jobs. While this approach does force educators to work diligently towards student success, it often leads them to teach to the test in order to improve scores, which can be a great detriment to long-term education.
Other approaches to improve the public education system have surfaced throughout the years, including suggestions to lengthen the school day, create a longer school year, and raise expectations and standards across all public schools. Different pedagogical approaches have been tried, including E.D. Hirsch's theory that a core knowledge must be taught to all students at the same time, and that the teacher must act as an authority figure who distributes this knowledge to his or her students. On the other hand, schools such as those in District 4 in New York believed that the students should drive the curriculum, and their methods of learning focused on exploration, discovery, and different types of projects. Pedagogical approaches such as these two, and all those in between, have been known to have both advantages and disadvantages. The use of different pedagogical approaches to improve the public education system has continued for decades, and the inability to agree on a single approach has led to a great deal of conflict and disagreement among educators and other school officials.
Over the course of the past few decades, the American public education system has gone through a great number of transitions. Politicians and school officials are constantly concerned with improving the quality of education, and as a result, there are always new theories being developed and tested in schools. It is likely that this will continue for years to come in the ongoing effort to produce the most effective education system possible.
In your opinion, in what ways have advances in technology hindered students' ability to learn?
I'm 51 years old. I don't own a cell phone. I don't use a GPS.
You got a check phone.
And I taught all my kids to tell time with a clock, a watch that had hands. So as far as technology hindering, I believe so. In some respect. I have students coming to my classroom in 8th grade who don't know their multiplication tables because they've been given calculators too early. We have 8th grade students who can't tell time because they've had digital clocks or watches. We've got kids who, don't understand the idea of resources other than the computer, the internet, and they think anything on the internet is legit. They don't realize what to weed out, what is inappropriate. They don't know how to work. They don't know how to think. I think technology is great, but it's being abused. I don't agree with the students being allowed to use their phones or iPads in the other schools, saying that they could look things up, because you're going to open up a whole new set of problems. Hindered students learning. Let's give an example. A student who can't tie their shoes because they got Velcro. That may not be technology, but it shows you once we make something easier, everything that comes into where you use, have to use thought and have to investigate and have to apply yourself, they don't have that. They don't understand what work is as far as looking for, investigating. Okay.
In your opinion, in what ways have advances in technology furthered students' ability to learn?
Well, anyway, boys and girls. These are girls from Quinnipiac. So when I started teaching, our technology was overhead projectors and film projectors, and that's about the extent of it. A mimeograph machine, where you turn the handle like this, the papers come out. Now, everything is amazing because it's just copied so quickly. So as far as technology in the classroom, when we moved to the middle school here, we got these whiteboards, and people wondered, and so did I, whether I was going to like them or not. Well, I decided it was probably the best thing I could ever do for learning. Remember the story exactly, because it talked about a stucco house. I don't know if you guys know what stucco is. It's a form of a plaster. And they didn't know what it was either. So I was able to look it up on the computer, put a picture of it, and that was the end of what the question of the vocabulary word stucco. So started using it for vocabulary words and pictures.
What are you trying to find? I can find it off of Google.
Books. So I find technology has added to the learning of all students in all areas.
Do you think current attempts to fix our educational system will be successful?
Current attempts to fix our educational system. I honestly don't think people understand what's wrong with our educational system, so in order to fix something, they have to figure out what the problem is in the first place. So I don't, the fixing that they do is they try to bring initiative upon initiative upon initiative, and it doesn't work, because I feel in order for something to work, or to see if it does or does not work, you have to kind of let it run its course. And a lot of times in a lot of districts, money is only there for a year or two, so initiatives can only happen for 1 or 2 years. And I don't think that's long enough for us to understand if it works. Currently, we're going through an emotional initiative, and personally, I don't use it in the classroom. We're paying all this money, and I don't see the benefits, and there's no buy-in. And I think that's another important thing, is there has to be buy-in from the staff and from the teachers and from the students and everything. And when you don't have buy-in, it's kind of hard to make anything work. So, thank you very much.